Hello and welcome. My name is Rorin, and welcome to this series where I get to interview and partner with some of my favorite humans, and we get to deep dive into specific topics all around business, personal growth, and everything in between. So, I have with me today the beautiful, amazing Olivia, who is a genius social media strategist and coach, and she specializes in helping other creative freelancers, and especially in social media, to help them be able to build the business of their desire and really just being their awesome creative selves along the way while running a freelance business. So, hello, how are you?
Hi, good. I'm so thrilled to be doing this today.
I'm excited too. Lots of fun things. Yay! Cool. So, what we're going to talk about today, that we are deep diving into, is taking the BS out of shoulds and to figure out what you want. Now, this applies to like if we're as marketers trying to guide our clients because they're come to us a bajillion times being like, should I post a bajillion times on my social? Should I use these hashtags, etc. Right? And you hear this a lot in like digital marketing where it's like I see all the shoulds in blogs. Well, the same thing also applies when you like search like what are the best practices for running a good successful consulting business or a freelance business or etc. Right? Like you hear all of these shoulds. So Olivia and I are going to get down into the nitty gritty. We're going to have some real conversations. We're going to be human. We're going to be real about this and really just like talk about all the different things that she and I have worked on. So like I have been a 3 times business owner. It's just like how often I did this. Been
Oh,
running a
yeah.
business. Yeah. So like running a business, been doing this the last 10 years. My personality is notoriously sassy. Like I do what I want human as well, but like and have like personal narratives of being like a business owner and a marketer. I've worked under companies, I've worked in agencies, I've run agency, and so we have narrative, and I guide clients in how and clients and both the content creator and the business owner to collaborate together and create do fruitful collaborations. And Olivia has also done that. So Olivia, can you give some narrative around like just like your background and what you have done over years so that so people get to know you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I started entering into the social media world just by chance, I suppose, as a lot of people do. I started traveling full time and was like, oh, maybe I should become an influencer. And then over time, I was like, I definitely don't want to be an influencer, but I learned all of these skills of how to manage social media. So I started working with people who I was interested in. So, like women entrepreneurs in health, wellness, nutrition, like retreats, like all the things that I genuinely cared about. And I was like, cool, like I'm gonna help you manage your Instagram. Over time, over the years, I recognized that it really isn't about me taking over their business. It's about me empowering them to come into right relationship with themselves and their business and how to encourage somebody else to show up as they are in their most authentic way with my support and my guidance and my like, yeah, do it. So I really love the experience of being a coach in the sense that it's not me saying, okay, you have to do this, you have to do this. These are the things that work, these are the things that don't work. I'm like, what excites you? What do you want to do with your life? And we really just work on everyone's individual desires and needs and take it from there.
Yes, that is so needed, right? Like I get this all the time. Like clients are like, Rowan, what's like the perfect formula for me? Da 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 da. Like when you talk about human-centered marketing, what's the formula? And I was like, it's more like four general variables that will show up in a bajillion ways. And it's because like humans are like onions. Like that's what I say. So
Mm-hmm.
like the core of what we do, both either in social media marketing or working with humans in general, is that my favorite analogy in the world is that humans are like onions, quote Shrek right? And they're like
Oh,
onions
yeah.
in the sense that we're very multi-layered, we're very complex, we can stink a little bit and make you cry, but we're like magical in recipes, right? But like if onions like you slice, you dice, you chop, you do it in a bajillion ways, and they're all equally badass and good, but and there's no like one superior feta, cheese, garlic, on TikTok? Like, it's none of
Totally.
that stuff, right? It's like what's flowing right now, right? And so I love that we're talking about like it's not about, if I'm hearing correctly, when we're talking about like taking the BS out of the shoulds and doing what you want, it's really about like building what I like to call the defining compass, like your unique makeup compass to help you navigate the waters. Is that like a good some reflection of like
Oh
what you
yeah,
love to do? Yeah.
that's perfectly summed up.
Yeah. So let's set the scene and set some context around it, right? Because we're talking about like, and why we got excited to have this IGTV series together is that like, the post-pandemic thing happened. That changed our job description as digital marketers. Like we went from like,
Yes.
let's create this beautiful, articulate onboard scene to be like, oh, hey, also customer service. Oh, hey, also like event management. Oh, hey, also these things, right? Like our scope of work completely changed. But also on top of that, what the post-pandemic actually created is a reckoning of sorts where a lot of like true powerful creatives that are like good at their job and skill recognize that they don't want to work the 9 to 5. They don't want to work under someone else. And they want the freedom because the post pandemic world may have made them realize, like, oh, my kids are home and I need to have better work life balance and I need to have freedom of time. And my corporate culture doesn't let me have that anymore, kind of stuff. And there's like this like reckoning of like, oh, I have to go. So, for those listeners or watcher or viewers that are with us today, that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about like, and this applies to if you're watching or listening, if you're a marketer or a business owner or a freelancer, we're going to talk specifically of like marketing and social range today, but this applies to anyone in this space. But um, what I'm curious on is like when you're talking about attracting, you mentioned earlier that you talked about like building it for the life that is what you want uniquely for you. Part of it you also mentioned is like attracting like the people that you actually want, right? So like can you tell a little bit more about like that? Like tell me a little bit more like when we start talking about building this defining compass, where it would start.
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime I start working with a new client, my first question is, who is your ideal client? Who is your ideal customer? And not just someone saying, oh, someone who likes these kind of things. It's like, no, we're going deep into this. We're saying, what do they think about when they wake up? What are their fears? What keeps them up at night? It's really important, step one, to get super clear on who you want to work with, because you have a specific gift to offer. And it's really about finding the languaging to attract someone who is the perfect fit for you so that they can get the best help that they can get. And you can work with the people you want to work with. Once you get clear on who your ideal client is, then when someone comes in and they're like, well, I'm actually doing this thing, I'm like, oh, sorry, I don't actually do that. That's not what my mission is in life. And so it's so important for the content that you're creating, for the connections that you start to build, getting super clear on who you want to help and how you're going to help them. And that's like the core that everything to me gets built around.
Right, I agree. I mean, like that's the core of like business and audience design in general. Like whether
Totally.
you're a product or a service, we talk about this, right? But like when we start, and this is something that I notice when I talk to like clients or like baby freelancers or baby business owners, like they like there's like you hear this and they're like, that sounds amazing, and then you just like hear in the back of their mind going, can I afford to say no? So like, what do you say to those people that come to you? They're like, "This sounds awesome, and amazing," and then you just hear, like, I like to say, like, you just hear the
Yes.
scarcity dripping in your voice.
Yes. Oh my God, 100% yes. I mean, I speak from my personal experience because I definitely was at a point where I was like, yeah, I'll take on anything. And I know what that leads to. That leads to clients that are not going to fully show up. They're not going to pay you on time. You're going to feel anxiety. It's going to leave in some kind of mess in one way or another. So really, it's costing you more to say yes in that moment than just holding your ground and leaving that space open to actually attracting your ideal client. I even had something recently where I had a few intro sessions with people. And I was like, yeah, I love this. We're vibing. Yeah, cool. And then when I see my price, they're like, no. And I got that like 3 or 4 times in a row. And there was a moment where I was like doubting myself. And then I was like, you know what? Even though they had qualities of my ideal client, those are not my ideal clients. And by saying no, I actually feel gratitude towards them to be able to open myself up to someone who's like, hell yes to everything that you have to offer. So it's really those moments where you are like desperately trying to like hold on to something. Those are the moments where it's really important to actually let go of that and just be thankful for that opportunity to grow.
Right. I agree. And I also like to say, like, it's a not yet conversation, right? Like, I'm so notoriously bold. I guess that's the best way to explain my personality. So I
Hell
get people
yeah.
that come to me, right? Like people are like, I need to like be introduced to you. Or like I have people that come to me, they're like, when I first met you or heard you talk, I was so intimidated by you. And like so when they do get to talk to me, they've had a lot of conversations. And then after they talk to me, they're like, you weren't so like intimidating. And yet I felt clarity at the same time, whether or not they work with me. And I'm like, that's what I care about. I want you to be confident in whatever you decide to do, whether I'm a part of the conversation or not, like period. Right. Like if you got to go talk to someone else, you got to go do work with someone else and then you talk to me, that's fine. If you never talk to me afterwards, because you go and pivot off to do your thing, that's fine either. I am satisfied and felt like I have contributed and served my purpose when you have walked away from our conversation with clarity, right? Like that's the piece, whether I get paid for it or not, right? And like, let's also be honest, as freelancer or as like individual business owners and freelancers in general, like there's only so many clients that we can hold space for. Like as marketers, we act as reflection, like tones, right? And so like when we're talking about one of my favorite things that I like to say for those that are like, well, I want to say yes to everyone now because I don't know, or they have that scarcity dripping in their voice. I also like to say, like, also you are worthy of everything that you manifest and more. Like, you are worthy of that. How you resound with that statement is a lot of mental personal growth that you got to figure out. And then at that point, I'm like, go talk to Olivia, go talk to
Yeah,
one
no,
of your coaches, right? Like that's when I hand it off to like Olivia at that point. And I'm like, you should talk to this person because she'll actually let you like fully honor that point. I can only reflect the truest iteration of who you are in that moment. But I also say it is like, hey, like when you say yes to someone, especially as a service provider, you say no to someone else because you only have so much capacity to take on a person, right? Like even the top level agencies can only take on a certain amount of clients, right? And so by you saying yes to someone that you're kind of ready for or is kind of ready for you, you actually say no to potentially up to two hell yeses, because the effort that it takes to work with a hell yes client, or the effort that it takes to work with a not quite a hell yes client is 2 times the effort of working with two hell yes clients. Did I explain that right? So for the effort of
yeah,
working with
yeah,
one client, you is two hell yeses, right?
yes,
So if we just broke that down into like, cost, right? You essentially lost two clients of income for one. That may be a nightmare and take up so much more. So that's
absolutely.
right.
And as we change this narrative, I think it's really common for someone who transitions from a 9 to 5 to working for themselves. They still carry a lot of that 9 to 5 mentality, whereas I have to do the most, I have to take on the most. It's okay for me to suffer because I'm going to be making money. But this is a time where we get to recreate what we see as the baseline. So for me, it's like I want to create a business for myself that is full of joy, pleasure, excitement, and value for myself. And that does mean saying no to people that I genuinely don't think are a good match for me, because I am going away with the idea of we have to suffer to be profitable, to have success. And I'm really honoring the part of me that's like, I want to enjoy the work that I do at every point of it. And those moments that do feel sticky, those moments that do feel challenging, those are the ones that I look at and I say, okay, does this serve me anymore? And it's constantly checking in with myself. Does this how I have this set up, does this make sense for me as I'm evolving?
Yeah, I mean, as human beings, we're constantly evolving, right? So like what served us like a couple of years ago or like when we were kids may not serve us now. And it's not like they didn't have use. It's like your favorite sweater. You love the sweater. You wore it to
Yes.
shreds. And then at some point you got to Marie Kondo it out of your life and be like, thank you for your service and let it go because it's like worn to bits and it does not fit you. Like if your body shape changed or whatever the case is, like you gotta like think it for what it is and let it go. Now there are definitely things like mementos and stuff that you should keep around. Like those are like the lifelong theories and the stuff that you
Yes.
love, but like everything else is like you Marie Kondo out. I love saying Marie Kondo like as a
As a verb.
noun, as a
Yeah.
verb. Like you gotta Marie Kondo it out. Like you gotta refine it out at some point. Like that's how we
Yes.
stay lean, right? So let's talk a little bit about hours, right? Because we have this concept like we gotta prove our worth by working harder. And
Yeah.
there's like the joke among entrepreneurs because like I also want like before we go into the topic of hours, let's actually honor something real quickly here is that people when they hear freelancers or the gig economy, they just think it's like for some reason in their brain, they just think that, oh, I'm just like a employee still but just
Mhm.
running a 1099, right? So like
Yes.
before we even talk about hours, because that's like tactical shifts, right? Let's talk a little bit about this mindset, right? Because like, and it's like for me, I'm like, as a if you say you're a freelancer, you are a business owner. It's the same thing. Like if you're an artist, you're a business owner. Like I get so
100%.
grumpy when like artists and actors are like, I'm not running a business. I just work under someone. I was like, sweetie, your personal brand is your business. Treat it like that. Yo,
Yes.
goodness gracious. I was like,
Totally.
no, like
We're
so
changing
let's
that right now.
we're gonna call this out. We're gonna call it that's the first BS. Let's call that BS out. Is like if you're a freelancer, you're running a business, regardless if you're a solopreneur, proprietor, or an LLC, you're a business. So like what are your thoughts on that? Like do you also see that like disconnect of freelancer to business in that space?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's so, especially that I coach freelancers, it's really easy for someone to be like they see their client as their boss sometimes. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You like when someone comes into an or like into a session with me and we're like, cool, intro session. And they start interviewing me and they're asking me questions about what my credentials are. I'm like, honey, I am interviewing you. I am the business and you can apply to work with me, but in no way do I need to change anything about what I'm doing to be able to meet your specific needs. It's really about if you feel like you're in alignment with what I have to offer, I can take you on under the conditions that I have set and the boundaries that I have set for my business. But in no way do I specifically owe you changing anything about what I do. And I think that that's really important that people have to remember to not get swayed in different directions, to not say, oh, well, they need this, so now I'm going to wear this hat, or oh, they need this, I'm going to do this. So getting clear on what you want to do and sticking to that.
Right. And then like I also want to like talk a little bit about that because that also leads into like how many hours are you working conversation, right? Like
Exactly.
what do you want to do? So like let's also call out a second BS conversation is that there is a single thing that you should do, which is not the case, right? Like people aren't just a graphic designer or just a social media manager. There's actually a concept called multi-potentialite. If you watch a TED Talk, there's one about that. But that just means as human beings, we are multivariants. Even though like Olivia is a coach and I am a consultant, we sit on a diverse amount of experience and understanding and work with variety of clients, a variety of needs and variety of topics, right? To help, like we have this repertoire of a toolbox that makes us awesome. Like there's this concept that you're like, you got to niche down and you got to like only have one thing. And I'm like, do you need that?
No. I think it's really important to get the language down of how you represent yourself, but really focusing on the results. So for me, like, I don't really, like, at first I was like, I'm a social media coach. And then later on, I was like, well, I'm kind of also a business coach and I'm also a life coach. But rather than being like, hi, I am representing myself as this, this, and this, I'm like, these are the results that I bring. These are the kinds of people that I work with, and they're at this stage of their business. And the results that I bring are freedom, clarity, organization, connection to your brand. Like, there's so many different journeys of how to get there. I can have 3 sessions in a day and talk about completely different things. So my clients, I don't even talk about social media with them. It really is about meeting no, yeah, as you're saying, we have this repertoire, we have this toolbox, and it's about hearing someone's needs and being like, oh, okay, I'm gonna pull that, bring that out, gonna pull this here, bring that out. And it's really about like, I know I can help you. The way of how we get there isn't important right now. It's about where we want to take you and really focusing on that.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, it's like the end experience that you want to feel, right? So like in marketing language, what we talk about, like when you hear like investors or like top like fancy schmancy people in Forbes say you got to niche down or whatever, like I say like it's actually not that. It's like you should niche down in your core mission. So this like mission also gets kind of like overly used, like authenticity is overly used.
Mm-hmm.
Can we stop throwing
Totally.
this jargon? I would really love a day when we're not just like throwing around jargon. But anyway, I digress on that type of side tangent. But it's what we're really talking about is when we're talking about figuring out what you want and sticking to it is your niche is not necessarily, to Olivia's point, the what you do, but why you do all that you do, right? Like Olivia's why is that she loves getting people comfortable and owning fully what that wants. And if it means pulling for a certain toolbox to talk about certain things, that's how we're going to get there, right? But the why and the core and the end experience that she wants her people to feel is that same with me. Like my end experience is helping people that are change makers, so people actively making a change in the world, continue amplifying that impact in the world and doing it in their unique humanistic way, right? Like, and we do that by implementing through a human-centered mindset in how their marketing shows up and how their business shows up, right? Like that's what I do. Do I explain to you the bajillion different ways? Because I've literally had a conversation talking about hiring the correct person to like hiring the correct person to like should you use hashtags or not, and that has happened. Like to your point, in the same like 3 span of meetings in a day, I'll have multiple of those conversations, but that's not what my clients tell me that I do. They tell me that I give them the clarity and the confidence to be their humanistic self, right? And like getting them to own that point is part of the journey of experience that we give, right? So I hope that for those of you that are watching or listening, it'll like give you an idea of, oh, that's what we mean by niche. So that's like, so we've called out a couple of like BS points so far. First BS point is um that just because you're when you're a freelancer, you are a business. And then BS number two is like, well, actually we call 3 BSs. Like PS number two is like you have like owning, it's not about just a niche of what you do, it's why you do what you do. And the third thing
Mm-hmm.
is like being confident in owning your worth is like those pieces. So let's go. So now that we've tangented into back into that conversation,
Yes.
hey, conversations are tangent. We're tangent queens. It works with the territory. But let's talk a little bit about in this when you call it the BS and live into the what's, the wants, right? It's about setting these boundaries. Olivia, you have mentioned this a couple of times as like the language of owning your boundaries. So let's talk about like hours of work in that space. Like when we're talking about like there's this need to like work extra hours to meet things, it's because in like tell me a little bit about like why people think like that. I have an inkling, but I would love to hear from you why you think, why people feel like they just need to overwork themselves to
Yeah,
prove their
it
worth. Yeah.
totally. It goes back to this concept of a 9 to 5, concept of just like corporate jobs in general or the service industry when you're working hour by hour. So the more hours that I work, technically, the more money that I'll make. That's the mindset that's getting carried in from these established structures. So it's super common for someone to say, well, I just have to work harder. I remember I was coaching someone who just left their 9 to 5, and the next day, literally, they quit their job, they finished everything up. The next day, she's like, I'm here, I'm ready to go. I've done all these things. I'm like gonna spend all day working extra hard. And I'm like, chill out. Like, it's okay to enjoy the downtime. We're choosing this alternative lifestyle so that we can have the freedom to do the things that we actually want to do in life. We are our business, but our business doesn't need to become our entire identity. It's really important in those moments that you are seeing yourself like spin out and trying to overwork, to like pull back, evaluate what's going on, and making some changes internally. So for me, if I'm like, hey, I think I'm working a little bit more than I want to, instead of having a bunch of one-on-one clients, I just created a group program. So I'm still helping the same amount of people, but I'm doing it in a fifth of the time, and people are benefiting by learning from each other. So it's really about seeing what's going on in your business and finding ways to make it work for you. And if that means bumping up your prices and losing some clients, then that's the situation that needs to happen. If it means like taking a new spin on things, it's really about figuring out what's going to work for you.
Yes, absolutely. Like there's no as we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, there's no like one single answer to this, right? Like, and
Exactly.
like I'm sure like specific examples of like you just listed a couple of different boundaries pieces, right? It's about feeling the pain point and then asking yourself how to walk through those pieces. Like what, like if you feel this pain point and you have this answer, the best next step is to actually like ask yourself, if I implemented this new boundary, what would my new lifestyle look like? And does that feel right? Right. So like one of the ones examples that you listed that I immediately felt like if someone was listening to this, I could just hear their like they just like shrink, right? Like you just like they just tense. The one that is like, oh, if you raise your prices, right? Key contention conversation, raising your price. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody hates that. Whether you're a 9 to 5 or you're like in business, like no one likes to like raise their prices because it's like suddenly people being like, I have to deserve my worth in this space, right? Like they have to be like, oh, I am worthy of this increase of price. So like that's like if you heard that statement and you go immediately, it's that is probably why, and that is a totally normal humanistic instinct.
Oh
It's
yeah.
called being human. So what would you say to that person who like tenses up in that case and they're like and you're like, it is okay to lose a couple of clients like that, right? Like, and
Yeah.
again, it's scarcity that kicks in and it drips in their voice. What would you say to that person?
I mean, I've been through this process hundreds of times, to the point now where
Same.
I'm like, hey, you raise your price. Like for me now, I'm like, of course that's what you do. But there was a time where I was charging like a fifth of what I charge now. And I was like, can I have a $5 more, please? Like I was like in that scarcity mindset so intensely. And I thought that if I changed my pricing, I would have to do that over explaining. So there's a lot of things to break down here. I hosted a few different workshops on raising your prices and why it's important. The main piece around it is the value and knowing your worth and knowing what you bring to people. So if I just said, oh, I help people gain followers on Instagram, to me, I'm like, okay, that doesn't feel like that's like the value that I bring. The value that I bring is I'm helping people get the freedom to be able to express themselves and continue on with the business of their dreams that can funnel all of the other projects in their life. And to me, that is invaluable. That is thousands and thousands of dollars worth. So in those moments where you're like, oh, I'm already working with these people and I don't know if they can afford it, it's not about what projection you're putting on somebody else. If, okay,
Never
which,
judge a customer on what they can do, right? Like, yeah.
correct. Yeah. And if in those moments you're like, well, if I raise my prices, then they aren't going to want to work with me. One, that's like assuming what they're going to say. And also, if that is the case, then those probably aren't your ideal clients. Your ideal clients are going to understand your worth and they are going to be happy to pay you. And they're going to be stoked that you're raising your prices and they're going to celebrate with you. And instead of saying, oh, well, I'm raising my prices because I've done X, Y, and Z and I've gained all these skills, like none of that, like let all that go. Say, as of next week or next month, whatever, this is what's happening. This is the transition I'm making in my business. I love working with you and I'm excited to continue. It's changing the script of like, you're doing them a disservice. And rather than that, it's saying, I am helping you invest in yourself even more for you to show up more fully.
Absolutely. Cause like, I was also going to say, like, let's be real. If they're like, I don't believe in the value and I can't afford you in this case, that means that like the stuff that you're going to do for them, they're not even prepared to receive. Right. Like,
Correct.
right. Like I had those moments when we were in agents. Cause like when we started, like there wasn't even a job, like there was like barely a job description for what a social media marketer was. And like agencies, you had SEO companies that said they did social, or you literally looked around a room and you said, you're a millennial. And nowadays it's you're a Gen Zer. Um, you should know how to do social media, right? And so like there was like zero like established quo, and all you got was like you got really good, beautiful boutique agencies that charges a hefty sum. And like we had our role when we started was like I really loved working with small businesses, but then my reason and the drive, to your point, the why you do what you do, and that's like the true worth, the invaluable worth that we're talking about. Like my thing was um striving to set standards in our industry and really implementing human-centered marketing, right? And like it got to a point where we had to do a whole pivot of our audience. Like we went from small businesses into well, like we still took care of small businesses, but we were really honed in on like scaling small businesses, meaning your product fit is set, you're at least 2 to 3 years, you have built over the 1,000 followers to start, because until you've grinded that 1,000 followers, you don't know your true audience online, right?
Yep.
And then you've done those things and you're ready to scale, and you can think in the maturity of the possibilities of scale. Baby companies, bless their hearts, they have lots of things that they want to do, but like Lord have mercy, if I actually went in and did like hard scale strategy conversations and they didn't come out of a company that they led the scale in, it would just go.
Yes.
And that literally cuts the capabilities of what I could do for them in half. And on top of that, it was like there are pre parameters, like gotta think in a change maker mindset, gotta have somewhat systems, gotta understand your voice, gotta be gotta be able to supply inventory or services appropriately. Like all of those things that I need that's when I usually say in a sales conversation of I need you to talk to this, and this person first before you can work with me, is not because I don't want to work with you. And I always say it's not because I don't think you're worthy. It's a not yet conversation. And I want you to invest time with these people first, so that by the time you work with me, you get the most bang for effort experience with me. Right. And that's not just Roaring's authoritative tone sounding confident. It's like literally like I've pulled teeth way too many
Yes.
times. And
Uh-huh.
I have felt so bad multiple times in that pulling teeth that I'm like, mama does not have time for this anymore. Like I was like, what I started doing is I found like that's the thing is like you don't like are a lot of people in service, we have this need to nurture, right? Like we want to help you as much as possible. And guys, sometimes the best thing to do is find good referral partners and know where you stop. Not everyone needs to be the big monopoly person in the room. Also,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of management.
More hours than we're ready to work.
Right? That's how I feel about it. Like you essentially build a gilded cage at that point. Like if you grow to that level of scale, you have built a business into a 9 to 5. We talked about worth and raise on that piece of boundary setting. Let's actually talk about another fun topic that I'm sure, like when we're talking about setting our boundaries and being confident in our want, is scope creep. Let's talk about that real quickly here. So scope creep, you hear this, it's not a, oh my God, I don't want to do it tone. Sorry, that's going to scope creep. We're going to cost extra, blah, blah. Like that's not what most people, when they hear the language of scope creep, that's like the tone that enters their voice in that space. But let's talk, I'm curious, like what would you say to a baby company, like if we're talking about this need to nurture, like we're constantly seeking to nurture, there's their instinct that we have to prove our worth, right? And we already talked about like owning our worth and asking for the price. But another side step of like being a very nurturing spirit is saying yes to everything. And it's really hard when the gray area is our toolbox. So what do you say to a person in that situation?
That is a lesson I have learned through many rounds of trial and error. Many failed attempts at this have led me to the point where I'm like, I don't actually do that because I think honestly, sometimes you just kind of have to unfortunately experience it. You got to go, especially if you're just like, these are the people who are just starting out their business. Sometimes you don't really know what you're going to like and what you're not going to like. And it takes going through and trying the different things out to be like, I actually don't enjoy that anymore. And I feel like I was in the past in the mentality where, oh, there are things that you don't like to do, but you just, that's what you do. And it took me hiring my own business coach to be like, Olivia, you literally don't have to do that a day in your life and still have the business of your dreams. And I was like, what? Really? So I think in the moment, like the first step is like getting clear on what you want. And if you don't know what you want, just trying out different things and seeing what feels good for you. And then the next part is like that difficult opportunity to practice setting your boundaries. Hey, I love that you are looking for this. That is not a service that I provide. And as you mentioned, calling in on someone else to help with that, but getting so clear on what you do and utilizing all of the content. So newsletters, email, emails, website, social posts, like you say, like, this is what I am excited to help you with on your journey. And it's not the like nitty gritty bullet points, but it's giving someone a clear sense of like what you're here to do. And you're like not going to budge on that.
Right. Yeah. Like we talk about like how we talk about a bajillion specific things. So like if you went on my blog, you'll literally see me talk about everything from like the overarching concept of human-centered marketing to like, here's the latest trends that are happening. Right. And like those are designed because two things. I say it 5,000 times over in calls and I need to give a reference point to my dear clients.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
was like, priority number one. Priority number two is that it's an entry point, right? But then when you land on my homepage, it's about overarching experience. Like if you go onto my website, that's what you see. And the same thing for you, right? Like that's the piece to that. And then like we use like follow-up email newsletters and stuff to like really pitch appropriately what we do. Um, and like for those that are starting out, I agree. It's like go try things out. I'm curious on you, at like how long do you think someone should try something out before they realize, oh, that's not what I love?
A month. I'm like,
Month, right?
I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, when I first started out, like I would take things a month at a time and just experiment with it and say, cool, let's do this. And at the end, we're gonna have a check-in together. To not have this like open-ended, oh yeah, that sounds great, let's do it. And then like a year down the road, you're like, what am I doing? I hate this. But it's having that opportunity to have that reset at the end of the month to evaluate how you felt. I mean, if you want to go longer, do that, but it's like not like, oh, I'll try this out for a year and see what I think about it. It's these like micro experiences that I think really give you a sense of what feels good for yourself and giving you that option to check in with whoever you're working with and saying like, hey, like I am just starting out. I'm trying on a few different hats. Let's see what I'm most excited about and let's take that and then focus on that afterwards.
Absolutely. And I would say, like, if you are a business owner or a top level manager who's in the space of hiring out right now, is like the instinct as like the other side, the client receiving that. I'm like, oh, but I just need you to be with me forever. No, 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 no.
No, no, no.
Let's be honest. Like you yourself may not be expecting to be in your same role forever. Why are you expecting someone else to do the same? Like, let me be a little sassy here, right? But like the
Please.
beauty of the human beings are free flowing. Businesses are able to thrive and grow because the business itself is its own living organism with people free flowing in and out, like literally like a cell organism. Like you have stuff flowing in and out at the same time. Clients and employees slash team members slash contractors slash agencies, right? Like it's based on growth and it's based on what's needed. And I think I agree. Like monthly reviews are so key. And if you're like in the conversation of contract signing, you're like, but wait, I put this in my scope of work and then this is not working. It's like when you're writing contracts, you're writing the full experience and you're keeping it generally generalized enough to where you can say yes or no on certain things. And then you can say that's in scope of work and that's out of scope of work for me. And then as you fully understand what you love and what you don't love, then you start writing things like, this is completely out of scope, and if you really need me to do it, I'll pay an extra price, and then you put a higher rate on it at that point. Or you normally if a client's like, can you do copywriting for a website for me? I'm like, I can, but that's not really my happy place, but I can introduce you to someone else. Like that's a really easy way of saying that. And then they understand that it's not like I'm worthy too much of this to write copy and content for you. It's more like I've been there, done that. Of that is my zone of excellence, but not my zone of genius. Like that's another language that you can also use. If you're in this stage of organizing, my favorite trick in the world is you list all of your services and then three signals: a star, a heart, and a dollar sign. Star, because this is the thing that everyone tells you that you're good at. A money sign, because this is the thing that actually makes you money. Just because you love video production and stuff like that doesn't mean that it's actually a sustainable business model the way you're making that, right? Like that's a clear, easy example. And then the third thing is heart. If you get all three things on certain deliverables, that's the stuff that you love. And then you should do that honestly every single year, in my opinion, because things like a pandemic will literally change your job description.
Correct.
Like many social media marketers are like, I actually did this because I'm a creative person, not an engager on customer person. And so they're like literally having these like reckoning conversations with their bosses, being like, hey, I can still do the content and the social side, but what you're actually asking for in customer service and community management, that actually needs its own person. And in agency, we actually had three people attached to every single team for that reason. So this has been lots of fun in conversation, and I love that we've like dug deep in boundaries. And we've covered lots of layers of the onion. So for those of you that have been listening through all of this, you're probably like, notes drastically on all the things, right? But my curiosity is, Olivia, what would be one thing that you would like for people to like take away with to start implementing?
I love this question. And my biggest advice, honestly, is to stop overthinking. I think that that is the one thing that really gets in the way of people doing the things that they actually want to do. It's this strive for perfectionism, this worry about how it's going to be received. Am I supposed to post at this time or this time? 2 posts or 10 posts or whatever? Like, let it all go. Like, just let all of that melt away and do whatever you're genuinely excited about doing and just go with it. If it means posting, putting your phone down, throwing it away for a little bit and coming back to it, do that. But finding ways to just like quiet your brain, quiet those like self-sabotaging thoughts, let them pass so you can actually start doing the work that you want to do. Rather than holding yourself back and always upper limiting at these moments, it's recognizing when you're getting in your own way and saying, I'm done with that pattern.
I love it. Yes, breathe, let it go. Like before you can explore into the unknown, you have to first let it go. No pun intended of Frozen 1 or 2. Like, that's like the base to it. Yeah, I was like, if any of you like, I was in my head, I was like, as Olivia's describing this, I'm like, if people just need to watch Frozen 1 or 2 to watch the character developments of Anna and Elsa, because that's what you're describing. Like for those of you that are Disney nerds like me, like that's like a great way to do. Yeah. But thank you so much for being a part of this series with me. How can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Olivia Coleman or my website, also found on my Instagram, oliviacoleman.co.
Awesome. Yay. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for being a part of this. For those of you that are listening, I hope you take some time today and just breathe, right? We call it a lot of BS, but it's like you literally overcleaned your house. You gotta rest and enjoy that clean house before you welcome something new in. Have a wonderful day, and we'll chat with y'all later. Bye.
Thank you.